Hi there! Welcome to Pallet University and the second episode of our Poké-ology series, where I explain some of the biological mechanics behind some of the 18 elemental types in the Pokemon series. We've had quite a few new subscribers lately, and I really want to keep that growth going, so if you're one of the roughly 50% of my viewers who are not subscribed, make sure to click that button down below. Also, you can help me beat the YouTube algorithm by leaving a comment down below as well. If you haven't seen the first video in this series, make sure to go check that out. In that episode, I explain how not all grass-type Pokemon are literal plants, but can still do photosynthesis. I explain how that happens, the mechanics of how that works, so make sure you go check that out if you haven't yet. In this episode, I will be taking on the water type and explaining how they get all the water for their attacks, but I do want to warn you ahead of time, this episode does involve math. As per usual, the most obvious answer is partially correct in that water-type Pokemon, I'm sure, do use some of the water that they just drink or have like some sort of storage system in their body that when they drink water, they can just use that for their attacks. And it's even easier if they live in water like the, vast amount of fish Pokemon. But, how do Pokemon that live mainly on land, such as the water-type starter Pokemon, get all of the water that they use? And the answer lies in sort of an interesting thing that you probably learned in high school biology. During the process of cellular respiration, your body sort of takes glucose and oxygen and creates carbon dioxide. That's why when you breathe in oxygen, you breathe out carbon dioxide. The process that does that is called cellular respiration. But what you might not know is that process also produces water molecules, which is why when you breathe on a mirror or a piece of glass or something, it steams up because you're breathing out water molecules that you're creating through that same process that you create CO2 in. Most animals just exhale this water, but some desert-adapted animals can actually use that water and sort of filter it out from their breath and use that to keep themselves hydrated because, in the desert, water's pretty hard to come by. So if you can make your own water, that's, free water, basically. So, here comes the math. For each one molecule of glucose that is used in cellular respiration, 6 molecules of water are produced. And here's the chemical formula for that reaction. This might look familiar to you. Let's say that this Squirtle here uses 1 gallon of water for every water gun attack. How much sugar, or glucose, is needed to create the water for that move purely from respiration? The mass of 1 gallon of water is 3,785 grams. In order to figure out how much glucose we need to produce those 3,785 grams of water, we need to know how many moles of water that is. If you've never been great at chemistry, like myself, a mole is a unit used to measure this many molecules of a substance. Why that seemingly random number? There is a historical reason for it, but that's not really important, so don't worry about it. Basically, it's just so we can be consistent in measuring substances that have different masses. 1 mole of water has a mass of 18.01528 grams, which is way less than we need. To find the number of moles that we need, we divide that 3,785 by that 18 and some change, and we get 210.099 moles. I know this is really technical, but stay with me here. We've already established that 1 glucose molecule equals 6 water molecules, right? Well, that applies to moles as well. 1 mole of glucose yields 6 moles of water. So we can divide the 210.099 moles that we need by 6 to see how many times we need to run this reaction to get the quantity of water that we need. And it turns out to be roughly 35 times. So because we need to run the reaction 35 times, we need 35 moles of glucose because 1 mole is used every time we run the reaction. 1 mole of glucose has a mass of 180.156 grams. So we multiply that by 35 to get the amount of glucose that we need to create this gallon of water. And that gives us 6.3 kilograms, or for my fellow Americans, 13.9 pounds of sugar. Thank you for bearing with me through that. I hate chemistry so much, but it does have its uses sometimes. Big TLDR. Assuming that a Pokemon is perfectly capable and perfectly efficient in collecting all of the water it produces through cellular respiration. To create 1 gallon of water, you would need 14 pounds of sugar, which, if we're sticking with using Squirtle as the whole premise for doing all of that math, Squirtle itself officially weighs 19.8 pounds. So it would need to eat nearly 70% of its body weight in pure sugar to create enough water to use Water Gun once. That is absolutely insane. It makes much more sense when you consider, bigger bodied Pokemon such as Blastoise. To create that same gallon of water, Blastoise would only need to eat about 7% of its body weight, which is much more manageable. It's still a lot, but much more manageable. But you also have to consider that Blastoise presumably uses a lot more water per attack than a little Squirtle does. So it would need to run that reaction much more than the 35 times to get much more than just 1 gallon of water. Like, I couldn't imagine a Blastoise using Hydro Pump and only using 1 gallon of water. So it would need much more water and therefore much more sugar. Let's say Blastoise needs to use 5 gallons of water for an attack. That would mean that it needs to eat roughly 70 pounds, or about 37-ish% of its body weight. Still a lot less than Squirtle, but still a massive amount of pure sugar. And keep in mind, this is literally like pure sugar. This is not just pounds of food. This is pure glucose. Very few animals that weigh like over a pound can eat that large of a proportion of their body weight in a day and live. Let alone if it's eating pure sugar, it's not getting any other nutrients that it would need to survive. If you ate nothing but literal pure sugar, you would die, within a handful of days. I really don't think that this is a plausible way for Pokemon to get water, but we really only know of 3 different ways that animals in the real world can get water, which is free water, which is, what you would think, finding water out in the environment and drinking it. Moisture contained in food, so like if you eat, an orange, there's a lot of water contained in that orange, and that water goes into your system as well. And 3, which is metabolic water, this, thing that we've been talking about this entire time, water created through cellular respiration. It's likely that purely aquatic water types, which to be fair is most of them, can just use the water around them for attacks, like bringing the water in through their gills and pumping it out through their mouth through some sort of really effective pumping mechanism. But the amphibious ones likely just fill up with water when they go into the water. And then they also have some sort of sugar or lipid stores in their body that they can use and break down very quickly when that, storage water is used up. Either way, water types, especially the smaller ones, would likely run out of water much more frequently than they do either in the anime or the games, which is never. Once again, thank you for bearing with me through all that math. I don't personally like math, and I know if I'm a scientist and I don't like math, so you probably don't either. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Make sure to let me know down below your thoughts on all of this. Where do you think water types could get their water from? Do you think maybe they're just magical and can just create water whenever they want? Like I said, it's just really not plausible for them to either be able to store that much water in their bodies or for them to be able to manufacture water that quickly in that big of quantities, seemingly out of nowhere. So that honestly is probably one of the more plausible explanations, is that they can just magically create water out of nowhere. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Pallet_U to keep up on all things Pokemon science, and as always, there's a time and place for everything.